July 19th, 1975, Elvis performed 2 shows at Nassau Coliseum, one at 2:30 and another at 8:30. The first show, he wore the chicken bone suit, which you're seeing right now, and the evening show wore the gypsy. Now, it's funny, fans generally don't care for these suits, but I especially have always been fond of the gypsy. Maybe it was because how Elvis looked physically at the time period. His hair was a bit shorter. His sideburns, you can see, are a bit shorter. He was overweight, but not that swollen. He still looked good and looked like Elvis in the face, if you know what I mean. Sometimes, when he had a bit of water retention, he sort of lost that Elvis look, So these shows, along with many others from this summer, were so electric. Now, I don't own this particular footage, but when I show others this footage of him singing with his guitar swinging around, some love it, and some think he's acting kind of erratic due to a pill-induced state. Me, I love it. The spontaneity, the charisma, the silliness is just entertaining to me. Elvis was just cool. He's a fantastic entertainer. So at the time, Elvis was dating Diane Goodman, and maybe this could have added to some of the spark that we see in his performances. I find this reporter's review from the New York Times kind of interesting about this evening's performance. Let me share it with you. All right, Monday, July 21st, 1975. This is what this reviewer says. Elvis Presley played Madison Square Garden in 1972 for the first and last time. Since then, he has stuck to the suburbs, like most middle-of-the-roaders. Except that, when he wants to, Mr. Presley can still rock. And he felt like rocking a refreshing lot of the time Saturday at the Nassau Coliseum. So, this guy doesn't necessarily look like an Elvis fan. He's probably a hippie, probably like the other acts of the time, but he was pretty accurate when he said that Elvis really didn't hit the inner cities. He kind of hit the smaller venues after Madison Square Garden. When this observer last saw Mr. Presley, it was also at the Nassau Coliseum 2 summers ago, so 1973. Then he was fat, lazy, and ineffectual. Gosh, he's being a little harsh. On Saturday, he was still fat, fatter than ever, a blown-up cartoon of his spare 1950s toughness. But he wasn't lazy, and he most certainly wasn't ineffectual. Well, he's a little rough, but there's some truth in that. I don't necessarily think that the 1973 Uniondale, he wasn't fat. He was a little overweight, but this guy is probably expecting 1968 comeback Elvis. Fat or thin, overpowering or feudal, he still inspires and accepts the adoration of his fans with the good-humored grace of a king. Mr. Presley's fans may not number all the country these days. His records are not longer guaranteed the top of the charts, whatever, blah, blah, blah. But okay, we can say this guy probably wasn't an Elvis fan, but he could still tell that Elvis had the charisma. And he was still a likable guy, just like Elton said. Even though he was in bad shape in 76, now we're talking 75, but in 76, you could still see those moments of greatness. And Elvis was great throughout this whole show. You got to listen to it. Now, regarding the 1973 Uniondale, Elvis was a little out of shape. He was gaining a bit of weight, but he was still awesome. Like, totally charismatic, giving great shows. I think this guy was just looking at maybe that's the way it is, Elvis, It's not like Elvis was on TV every day. The latest single on the charts at the time for Elvis was Trouble, a country rock type song, paired with Mr. Songman on the B-side. And I really love Mr. Songman. You guys, on a side note, need to check out some of the outtakes especially, or at least the undubbed master of Mr. Songman. This single came from the Today album, which was just released a few months earlier. And if you notice, if you listen to the concerts of that time period, he spends a lot of time promoting the song Trouble, which I think was good because Elvis knew his position in the charts was kind of slipping. He wasn't at the top anymore, like that reporter from the New York Times said. And as I wrap up this video, on a side note, about 7 weeks earlier, June 15th, Elvis had his famous eye surgery done. A lot of people are curious about what time period it actually was. It was about 7 weeks before this date where you see the footage and all the pictures from Uniondale. Now, I made a video about this. Maybe I'll link it in the description. But, you know, the doctors, on a totally side note, the doctors were like, hey, you don't need this, Elvis. Even his friends were like, don't do this. But Elvis just had it in his head that he looked more youthful if he had a little eye lift. Now, he didn't have a facelift and all that stuff. But he was 40, and I guess, 40 at that time was totally over the hill. And some people say that they noticed a change in Elvis's appearance. I don't really, looking at pictures, but I do see, which I'll show you guys here in a minute, from the 77 CBS special, it looks like there's a bit of tightening around the eyes, like it'd been pulled. So tell me if you see it as well, and I'll talk to you guys in the comments. Hope you guys enjoyed this one.